my personal view is that, like I said, being down there, having American citizens be down there is better for ordinary Cuban people than us being isolated.
Oh, that definitely. I think that we're the blessed moment of the change of policy, given both sides or one side common, that those influences are in fact very positive. I do believe that. We're getting there. I mean, I think you pointed out very nicely what has the U.S. achieved with this nothing, and what have the Canadians and the Europeans achieved with the sparking of education.
So, you spoke about the impact of the United States, I mean, on the United States, that's what you're saying. Basically, right now, the way the embargo functions, I guess, is it's not permitting Cuba or Castro's government any sort of credit or loans or, basically movement with the banks in the United States. Given the history of the way they do their economy things with other countries, I mean, they've stolen enough money from this country over the past, 50 years, that basically once we allow loans and these things to happen, and then they default on them, who's gonna bail out, these banks again? And basically, is my tax money going to end up going there indirectly because we allowed Castro credit?
Well, I mean, it's a good point. I would say in terms of tax money that in the future, if and when we establish direct banking relationships with Cuba, those are discrete transactions, and so it's between the buyer and the seller as to what happens with that money. And I suspect we're not, the taxpayer's not going to go bail out Cargill or some other company that gets their property stolen from the Cubans if that were to ever happen. But the larger point is a good one, and you talk to some of our members that actually do legal business in Cuba, and they do business under something known as cash advance. And so basically, because we don't have a banking relationship with Cuba, the Cubans have to pay cash for anything that we want to sell before it leaves U.S. ports. And so we do that now. And if you talk to some of our businesses that do business in Cuba, they say that cash advance is the most wonderful system on earth because we get paid first. We need to get paid cash, so we get the cash. And then Cuba goes off and pays or doesn't pay the French and the Canadians and the Chinese and the Brazilians and the Venezuelans and everyone else that it owes on credit.
Right.
The Cubans hate this for obvious reasons, I think. They like paying credit, they like having payment terms. And they pay or they don't pay these other countries. They have to pay us. And so it's a sweet deal in some respects for our guys, except you balance that against the ridiculous headaches that come with having to do Cuba, having to sell to Cuba in terms of getting licenses to travel to Cuba and dealing with the American bureaucracy. So it's not an entire solution.
You mentioned that Brazil and many other countries really want U.S. to remove the embargo and improve relations with Cuba. What impact do you think, why is it in the interest of the rest of Latin America and other countries, what would be the impact on them if we did lift the embargo or improve relations with Cuba? And my other question is unrelated, but you talked about how the dual currency is Cubans, and I was wondering on that, and also how the introduction of the dollar into Cuba would affect the economy.
Sure. I'll teach you to say something there. To be honest, on your first question, we have conversations about Cuba occasionally at work, and I don't have the foggiest idea why Brazil and other countries are pushing so hard for the embargo to be lifted. Yeah.
It's much the same reason why the Middle East is pushing the U.S. for issues with Israel. They don't have direct, interest, but it could be a regional issue.
Well, that's a better answer than I would have given. What she said. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's no direct interest there. It's all there. As for the dual currency system, the reason why it disadvantages ordinary Cubans is because the Cuban government takes in money, for example, if you're a foreign company working in Cuba, the Cuban Cuban government takes in money in coups, is what they're called. It's the foreign currency of Cuba. And it's roughly equivalent to a dollar.
Without the tax.
Right, and then there's a 25% tax on top of that if you're paying in dollars, because Cubans don't like the United States. And so the money comes in the coup form, and then the Cuban government turns around and pays the Cuban employee in local currency, which is worth, I think, 1/20th, or I mean, some very small fraction of what the foreign currency is worth. And so what you have, and then in the normal way that the economy works, the domestic currency buys virtually nothing. I mean, they have these dusty, old local currency stores that no one shops in. I mean, we were there, the government official said to me, I asked him to take me to one of these stores, and he said, no one shops there. You have to go to the foreign currency store. You can't survive without going in there. And so what you have are Cubans that don't earn foreign currency needing to shop in places that only take hard currency. It's an imbalance that the Cuban government, I suspect, knows it has to address. But at the present time, because of the balance of payments accounts, it's really difficult to use.
I'm really interested in Cuba and along the line of the relationship policy and stuff. And like I'm a graduated senior just going out into this. And I'm wondering, what's your opinion on like Raul and Fidel? They're both very old. Like they have to die eventually. Like they're not bionic. What do you think is like the future of like Cuban relations? Like once you pass the Castro phase, do you think that they're going to that there's like another like 78-year-old that's just like waiting in line, or do you think there's like ever any chance for like new innovative faces? Almost like you said, there's a lot of the same like players in the game. Like, do you think they're ever going to take any people off the bench? So to speak?
Shift one seat over.
Yeah, that's really what it's been. I mean, the Raul's deputy is 2 years younger than he is, and I suspect next in line to take over Raul and Fidel will, depart quickly. A couple months ago, I probably would have said, well, Felipe Perez Roque and Carlos Laje were next in line to take over, because they were the officials that had the most foreign contact. Now, they were taken away because they were demoted or given other positions because they had the most foreign contact, and I think the Cuban government felt they were getting too cozy for foreigners. The way that Raul has set up his system, his style is different than Fidel Castro. Everything went through Fidel. He would approve every decision. It was very much a command structure. It was him, and that was it. And Raul has set up kind of a more consensual group of leadership. I suspect everything still goes through Raul, but he's, from the little that I know, empowered the various ministries with greater authority. And so I suspect there will be some sort of collective form of leadership that will muddle along if and when Raul is the president.
Another one. A few, but that was definitely me. So one thing we talk about is how the embargo was a failure, right? It's always like an example of a failure of an embargo. Now, failure means that there was a goal, right? And then that goal wasn't achieved. So my question is, what was that goal? And what, in the sense that the embargo was placed in there to achieve something. If we didn't achieve that, and maybe achieved other things, where did we fail? Like what was that original intent? I mean, was it something like South Africa where we're trying to like knock down the government, where you have to get the entire world to go against them and then knock down the government? Or is it something more like, preventing Che from, going into South America and then having enough money to support, creating 2-3 Vietnams there, or having Castro have enough money to chase people through the ocean, the 75,000 people that have died trying to come here to the place that set the embargo on them. I mean, where was that goal? Where did we?
Well, I think over time, as with rock, that the goals change, and this